Welcome to DEI Fundamentals. This is a training in which we'll be going over some of the foundational pieces of DEI and what those concepts really mean. This will include going over vocabulary and how the ARC Baltimore plans to include DEI into the organization's DNA.
The acronym DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Some of us may have heard these terms used together. However, we may not have talked about it in terms of work before. At the ARC Baltimore, we are committed to having a DEI lens as it pertains to all parts of our business. What does it mean to really have a DEI lens? It is looking at all of the things that make each of us unique and understanding how to make an environment in which everyone can feel valued, heard, and have an impact on what is actually happening in the environment. DEI often revolves around specific identification factors, things like race, religion, upbringing, culture, and language. These are just a few of the things that could be looked at when considering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the workspace. And that starts with first having the conversation about what comfort looks like for everyone.
Before jumping into the definitions, we want to take a look at our DEI vision. The DEI vision for the ARC Baltimore states, attracting and developing diverse talent across our organization helps us to create better value for the individuals that we support and ensure equity for our staff. We strive to build diverse teams and an inclusive environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging and can bring their full selves into every environment. We embrace collaboration and pursue excellence with passion, humility, equity, and integrity. Our DEI scope encompasses a focus on race, ethnicity, gender identity, religion, neurodiversity, and sexual orientation for all ARC Baltimore staff and those that we support. When reading this DEI vision statement, we see that there are some key terms and phrases that stand out. Some of those include belonging, one's full self, collaboration, excellence, humility, and integrity. We already strive to include all of these things into the ARC Baltimore's DNA. However, the last sentence that speaks about the focus on specific identity factors like race, ethnicity, gender identity, religion, neurodiversity, and sexual orientation highlights the need to be intentional in how we ensure that these and other identity factors are represented in a respectful way that is not offensive to others, and that people feel safe engaging in conversations about DEI topics at work.
Now that we have established the intent of how we are going to use DEI here at the ARC Baltimore, it is time to get into really understanding DEI at its core. Here on this slide, we see three different groups of people standing or sitting next to each other. The first group of three people are standing over the term diversity. When thinking about diversity, we want groups that are built up of a wide variety of people. Variety in this instance means more than just differences in height, like depicted in this image. We also want diversity in thought. We want people who come in with different perspectives and different understanding, so that when we are looking to solve an issue or address a situation within the organization, everyone is not coming up with the same answer. Instead, we want a group of people who are able to consider what other people are going through outside of their identity group, and also within the identity groups that they represent. The second group that we see in this slide is standing over the term equity. When we are talking about equity, this does not necessarily mean equal. In the picture, we see three people of differing heights each holding up a letter that spells out DEI. In order to have their signs lined up at the same height, each person needs a different level of support. With that support, everyone is able to have a similar experience. In this case, to hold the sign in line with one another, certain members of the group are given specific support in the form of a step that is unique to their needs. Equity does not mean equal. Instead, it is providing a person with the support they need, so that they have a similar experience to every other person in the environment. Lastly, we see the third group sitting over the term inclusion. When talking about inclusion, we often hear the metaphor having a seat at the table. We agree that it is important for everyone to have a seat at the table. However, just having a seat is not enough. We want people to sit at the table, feel comfortable sitting at the table, have your voice be heard while at the table, and we want your voice to have an impact on what happens once the conversation is over and everyone has left the room. Being in the room is not enough. Being able to decide and influence what is happening with the room is the purpose of inclusion.
A major aspect of being able to establish a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization starts with having a shared vocabulary. Knowing what someone else is talking about, not being confused, or potentially misunderstanding what someone is saying, which can lead to unhealthy conflict, is very important when talking about sensitive subjects that can be taken offensively and are very near and dear to people's hearts. In the upcoming slides, we will be going over 10 terms that are related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that we can all have a unified understanding of what is being talked about when we hear these words in the workplace.
The first term we will start with is diversity. Diversity is defined as efforts to increase representation of different types of identities within communities. This can include demographics, sexual orientation, religion, as well as many other identity factors. When thinking about these identity factors, it is important to recognize that having a group of people who all have different identities does not always mean that they will think differently. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we want to encourage different trains of thought so that we can come up with the best solutions possible that are creative when addressing situations and problems.
Everyone has experienced culture in some way, shape, or form throughout their lives. Culture is defined as learned and shared values, beliefs, languages, and customs of a social group. This could include clothing, hairstyles, style of speech, food, and so many other things that are incorporated into our daily lives. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we want to acknowledge that there is the potential to have multiple cultures in any room, and that there is no one culture that is better than another. They are just different. We want the workplace to be a space where each culture is valued and represented in a respectful way.
Having groups where you feel included as your authentic self is important. Inclusion is defined as valuing differences as a source of strength, innovation, and performance, creating a sense of belonging. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we want to make sure that our staff and the people that we support all feel that they belong in this environment. It is not enough to just have a seat at the table. We want your voice to be heard, and we want you to see the results of your voice in your environment.
Race is a concept that has been used to categorize people within a population. Racism is the belief that some races of people are better than others. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we believe that all people have value, no matter how they identify.
How we see and interact with the world is not through just one of our identities at a time, but instead our perspective of a situation includes some, if not all, of our identities at once. Intersectionality is defined as the interconnected nature of social categories and identities such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. When looking at a person's experience, we cannot diminish the impact that one identity has over another. We must look at the person completely and try to consider all the possible impacts that their identity factors could have had on a given situation.
Based on the information that we have from our own experiences and the experiences of those around us, we form opinions about the people, things, and environments that we come in contact with. Bias is defined as prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared to another, usually in a way considered unfair. There can be unconscious or conscious biases. Here at the ARC Baltimore, we want to educate ourselves on the things that we could be biased against, so that we can actively combat discriminatory outcomes as we interact with the people around us. We do not want to create unfair advantages or disadvantages for the people we support or within our workforce.
While bias addresses how we think, discrimination addresses how those thoughts then turn into actions. Discrimination is defined as prejudiced treatment of a person on the basis of the social groups to which they belong and stereotypes about those groups. By being more aware of our explicit biases and the potential of implicit biases, we can work to eliminate discriminatory acts that could be carried out as a result of our personal beliefs.
Privilege is defined as systemic favoring, enriching, valuing, validating, and including of certain social identities over others. Individuals cannot, quote, opt out of these systems. Rather, these systems are inherent to the society in which we live.
Equity is defined as critically examining systems to identify biases that prevent equal access and opportunity to individuals, or a sense of fairness. When thinking about equity, it is important not to confuse it with equal treatment. An example of this could be, if a retailer were to provide a pair of shoes to all the people supported and the staff members in our organization. You wait in line for your pair, and when you reach the front, you ask for a size 9 pair of shoes. However, they are only giving out size 10 shoes so that everyone is treated equally. In reality, we want to be treated equitably. This would mean that everyone gets their needs met specifically to them and would get the size shoe that they wear. Having a size too small or too large would change the experience a person had. Having the size that fits them would help to provide the quality of experience that was intended. We want people to have a similar quality of experience, which could mean providing accommodations and supports that are unique to a person.
The last term that we will go over in this training is ally. An ally is defined as an individual who takes action to support social justice and works to eliminate oppression. A person who stands in support of a marginalized voice. To the right we see a quote that states, "I understand that I will never be able to understand completely. But I stand with you, and I will not let you do this alone. You were never meant to." As allies, we work to support a person or people to have more positive outcomes. We are there to emphasize their voice, not to overshadow it.
Being an ally is not passive. Instead, it requires us to align our words of support with our actions, even when it is not the popular choice to make. One question we should all ask ourselves is, are we an ally to the people around us? Some things that we can think about include, what are some ways you could become or strengthen your efforts as an ally? In the workplace, what do you think your team could do to become stronger allies? And lastly, what are some obstacles you see in the way of becoming a stronger ally? If you come up with any answers you would like to share, please reach out to the training department.
In this training, we have started to establish a shared vocabulary that we can all use when talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is important that we can understand what someone is communicating, especially when talking about topics that can be very personal. We will leave you with some tips on how to connect with others and increase your allyship both here at work and in your personal lives. Tip number 1, educate yourself. The more you know about a person or people, the more prepared you will be to give support when needed. Tip number 2, be aware of some of the challenges they may encounter. Knowing challenges can help us to be more understanding, patient, and compassionate when supporting others. Tip number 3, build a welcoming and supportive environment. Identify the needs of the person or people and create spaces where those needs can be met when possible. Tip number 4, be an advocate. If you see someone being discriminated against or bullied, speak up. Tip number 5, assess the policies and rules of the environment. Suggest changes to rules and policies to help everyone to have positive outcomes. Tip number 6, be aware of how you communicate. We want to avoid language that could be misunderstood or offensive to others. Avoid using jargon or slang so that the person does not mistake your meaning. Be sure to allow enough time for communication to take place without being rushed. Tip number 7, be open to feedback. If someone presents you with another way of doing something, be open to trying it out to decide if it makes sense to continue doing it in the future. These are just a few tips that can help us to build an environment where everyone feels comfortable and safe. Try them out and let us know how they worked for you.
In order to complete this training, you will need to return to your ICM training profile. Once you are there, scroll to the training titled DEI Fundamentals on your training list. To the right of the title will be a button labeled Action. Click on the button labeled Action and select the Take Quiz option. Another drop-down menu will appear with only one option in it. Select that option and the quiz questions will open in a new window. Answer all of the questions and submit your saved responses. You have now made it to the end of the content for DEI Fundamentals. Thank you and take care.